Today we are going to kind of do a team cooking episode. We're making something different, and it's called galette, which is actually a French word meaning a small pebble that is weather worn perfectly to skip over water. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, we never did the skipping of these stones, but it was kind of
because you didn't have a lake.
That's right. We didn't live by a lake, but our kids did have that experience, which is kind of fun. So it's kind of interesting knowing that this French word actually it means a pebble, but what we're making is actually a pastry, and it's a flat, typically round, rustic pastry that you can fill with jam, fruit, vegetables, meat, cheese, and it's going to be just kind of a neat thing. Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is our daughter-in-law and son, are home, and they brought back a galette that Alana's mom, Jody, had made a couple weeks ago. And I'd never heard of this term or had never seen this before. And then we were at Staples, of all places, and here on their magazine rack was a picture, was actually a Weight Watchers magazine, mm-hmm. with this galette on the front. And I thought, how cool is that? Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to make today. So it's going to be an apple galette, and I'm going to do a little bit of a variation of this recipe because you can add whatever you want, but we will be doing apples, which is what it starts with.
Yep, and I'll start peeling the apples.
So Gary's going to peel the apples.
Apple peeler.
And we have this wonderful Pampered Chef. It's an apple core peeler slicer piece of equipment, which is pretty awesome instead of having to do it all by hand.
Right.
So,
as they used to say, an old adage, it's great. It's the next best thing to slice bread.
Yeah.
I think it's the next best thing to a bread slicer. So here we go.
Okay. So he's off, and I am actually going to make pastry on my cooking show, and I will just hope that this turns out. I enjoy making pies and pastry, but sometimes it's a little bit problematic for it to actually roll out nicely, so we're going to see what happens. This recipe calls for 1.5 cups of flour. Flour out of here, and 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. And then we're going to slice in 1 stick plus 2 tablespoons of butter. And then just a dash of salt. I'll get the salt in here. And we're going to pulse that in my KitchenAid, or my Cuisinart rather. Typically, when I make my pie crust, I just make it and form it just with my hands. So yesterday, when I made this recipe for the first time to try it out, it was the Cuisinart that I used, and it actually, I think, turned out quite well. So we're going to just pulse this for about 10 seconds. No, well, 5 seconds, just to get it started. Okay, I'm going to get the flour down. And then we are going to add to that 1/3 cup of ice water. And I actually just ran some water from the sink tap and put an ice cube in to make it icy cold. When you are doing your pastry, it is a good idea to have cold water rather than warm water. The consistency just turns out better. And then we're going to pulse this for about 10 seconds. And you want it just to become, sometimes it can be more like pebbles, but we actually have it in almost like a ball. The recipe, that was just Gary in the background. The recipe calls for putting your pastry and rolling it and then putting it in the refrigerator just to to get, colder, but I am just going to put it right out on my pastry sheet, which is what I generally do. I mean, you can make pastry ahead and refrigerate it for a while. You can even freeze your pastry, which is what you get if you're buying it from the frozen section. But we're just going to roll this, form it into a ball, get out all of the extra dough here. Like I said, this is a little bit different than I'm used to with using the Cuisinart instead of just doing it all by hand. So we're going to form it into a ball, and using the ice water definitely makes it cold, and that's what you want when you put it in the refrigerator. I have my oven preheating at 400 degrees, and it takes quite a while for the oven to heat up. So in just about the time that we have this preheated, we'll almost be ready for the apples and be ready to put it in the oven. Oh, and I just, as a little side note, for those of you who saw my last show, I did want to tell you that Gary's antenna that he put together, those 48 pieces, he did get it together and it actually works. So we're kind of decided that we don't watch that much TV, and the cable we're not really using a whole lot, so we decided that we're going to just try the antenna for a while and get a few channels, and it is adequate for what we need, and so far it works. And we actually haven't watched much anyway since he got that antenna put together. You got done faster than I did.
I can go slower if I have to next time we do this.
Okay, so we're going to roll this out. Typically, as I said, the galette is a rounded pastry. This recipe actually calls for you to roll it into about a 12 by 14 inch rectangle shape. So that's what I'm going to do on this one. But otherwise, in the future, I would probably just do the round pie shape like I'm used to. And Gary sliced and peeled 5 apples. The recipe actually called for 4 apples, but they were a little bit smaller, so you did 5.
And do you want me to take this away now? Are you done with this?
Yes, I am done with that. And I am going to try to put this on my rolling pin. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. This is the part where I don't generally like to show off what I'm doing on camera, because you never know whether it's going to work or not. If it needs some help, I probably could have used a little bit more flour on the bottom. But it is actually going to work. Okay. So I'm going to let you take this out of the way too, Gary, if you want to.
Okay.
That's all done. Okay, I'm going to let you take these. Okay, and then what you do is then just roll your dough out onto your cookie sheet. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because you can just kind of put the pieces together as you're rolling and stick it over there. And it will turn out just fine. So I'm just going to leave it like this. So now what Gary is doing is he's going to chop half of the apples, which we're going to put on this pastry. And then we're going to put, the recipe actually calls for honey. So we're going to drizzle honey over that. And I'm going to add some extra things. I thought it'd be fun to add some caramel, because I make a caramel apple pie, which people like. So we're going to put some caramel on it, and then we're also going to add some walnuts to make it a little bit crunchy. So these are just additional things that we're adding. And then I'm going to layer the half apples, slices, on top to make it, kind of pretty looking. And then we're going to top that with a sugar and cinnamon mixture, and then top it with a little bit of butter. So
Yeah, everything's better with butter.
yeah.
Now, one of the things, if you notice what I'm doing here, I'm cutting out some of the seeds. If the apples aren't perfectly round and it goes through that apple slicer and corer, you will get a few seeds. So just kind of check in the center as you go through them and pull those out. And are you about half and half?
Yeah, just about half. Looking at different recipes actually online for the galette, it was really interesting because I also found a recipe that was for a vegetable galette, which I think we might try when we're on vacation this next week with our kids.
Sure.
With having a couple of vegetarians in the family, it's nice to come up with some new vegetarian ideas. As you cut those, I'm just going to do this on some of it.
Yeah, I'm going to dice some of these dice a little more, yeah.
Okay. So this vegetarian recipe has all the fresh summer vegetables: squash, zucchini, tomato, and then you add cheese, and I'm going to stay out of your way with that Cutco knife.
Be careful.
Cheese and different things, the fresh seasonings. So I'm not sure what we might be able to get from our garden, but we've have enjoyed using our basil, fresh basil, and things like that. So that's good, honey. The rest are going to be go on top.
Slices on top?
It'll go on top. Okay, so we are just going to put these pieces on like this. And it says to put your apples within about an inch of the outside of your pastry, because then when you are done, you're going to fold it over to about an inch to an inch and a half. Some of the recipes I found, actually, after you finish off your pie crust, they tell you to use an egg wash, which you could then put on top of your the outside of the pie crust. And an egg wash would be, I think that recipe called for a whole egg that you would beat up, add a little bit of water to it, and that gives it just kind of a shiny, appearance.
To it, right.
Sometimes you just with some recipes that we do, we just beat up egg whites too, which also gives it. That's when we've used
the knife. Spread them with a brush. I mean,
right.
As I'm using my knife.
The apple bars that we make, and you top that pastry with the egg wash.
One thing I might add, if you notice when I was slicing the apples with the apple slicer, I found this out the first time I ever used it, that it actually has the malic acid from an apple will react to the metal spiral rod and the peeler. And when you're pushing the apple through and pulling it off, I noticed it looked like you had greasy hands, and I thought, well, I know I washed my hands before I started, but you actually do get a reaction that's perfectly food safe. It isn't grease, it's a reaction of the malic acid to steel. So
that's good to know, because otherwise you might end up throwing out your apples.
Otherwise you throw out your apples thinking they're all black and greasy, but it's not at all. It's just a reaction.
Yeah. Okay, the next thing that it actually calls for is honey, and we are just about out of honey. It calls for, about a tablespoon?
Yep.
Which you can just, we should have got more honey. Squirt it over.
Yep.
But we're going to be adding,
that's good.
I'm just going to open this up a little bit. We can just get out a little bit more honey. And we're going to, actually can get that out of the cover if you want to. Since we're also going to add the caramel, as I mentioned, if we don't have quite as much honey, then that's all right.
Let's see what I can get out. Another trip to the grocery store is needed.
Yeah, it's kind of fun, I think, doing these recipes where you don't have to be as perfect. Very often with baking, you really have to be precise. But a recipe like this, you can just really have fun and add a lot of different things. So now I'm just going to drizzle caramel over this, and I have a caramel apple pie, it's called, and you actually top. It's like a French apple pie that we make with a crumb topping, and we top that with caramel, and we then add chopped pecans on that one. But this time we're going to put some nuts on it. I think this is going to be really good.
Makes it the best.
Yeah, I should have, I guess, done a little bit more research before I made that extra one yesterday, because I didn't put all these really good things in there. Okay, now we're going to finish it off by just making a little design with your apples.
I bet that yesterday's galette is not going to go to waste.
No, probably not. In fact, I bet
I bet
Brianna
there are people here with their cameras.
and maybe even Brad, who joined us today.
Apple galette.
I think Brianna is going to have to introduce Brad on our show here. What do you think?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because we wouldn't want to let Mike just totally outdo him, right?
That's right. We'll give you something to take home, Brad. And if you happen to run into Mike, you can just go ahead and show it off to him as you take a bite. Tell him make sure it's the last bite that you show him.
Okay, we're going to put this out just a little bit here. And as far as your design, you can really do whatever you want. Adding the 5th apple on this definitely made a big difference.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Need a
I
few more? Is that enough?
think that's going to be good. Okay, I'll add a couple more here. All right, now we have, to top this, 2 tablespoons of sugar and a half a teaspoon of cinnamon. And you just sprinkle that on top. When I was little, I probably shared this maybe, but my mother, of course, made a lot of pie. Again, with a large farm family, it took a lot to feed all of us. So she made a lot of pies and things, and the best part for us kids was getting to work with the pie dough, you know, like pieces like that. We would, you know, roll out and then we would make pie sticks. Yeah. So, and that's actually what you kind of enjoy too when we have some leftover pies. So now we are going to dot this with a tablespoon of butter. And if this was, or more, and if this was a little bit colder, it would be a little bit easier coming off, but it's okay. You could just kind of chop it if you wanted to, and then just put it on top. Another recipe that I found, I'm actually going to just do this, had you sprinkle the cinnamon and sugar all over the outside after you put that egg wash on there. So that gave it a really dark, you know, kind of brown look to it, and looked really good. Okay, now we'll see if this works. So then you take your crust and you want to go up over and just kind of, not sure how they say this, kind of fold it so that it's like they said, it's not perfect, but tuck it and fold it as you're doing it, yeah, like that, so that you're going to make some little folds, kind of like that.
It's not a pretty pie. It's,
no.
What did you say
Like
earlier?
they said, rustic.
It's very rustic.
Rustic. And then we're just making those little folds as you go over. And that will kind of keep it from the juices from coming out. A little bit more folding. And if it isn't, like we said, quite right, that's okay.
There you have it. Right?
And there is our galette. Okay, what do you think?
I think it's just the way it is. It's
Okay.
perfect.
Okay,
It's
so
not supposed
that's
to be
going
perfect.
to go in the oven.
It's an imperfect
Imperfect.
pie. called a galette.
And what was the other term that I found?
Let's get your cheat notes here.
Okay, they said a galette means it's like a flat, free-form, unpretentious. This is definitely unpretentious. Unpretentious yeah.
Okay, you want
It would be
to
much prettier if it was more pretentious,
There
I
you go.
think.
That would be
Okay.
called a pie.
Okay, so we are going to bake that at 400 degrees for 50 to 60 minutes. Again, I like to go a little bit, less time, and then if you need to add extra time, then we'll do that. Okay. Ta-da! So that was yesterday's galette that I made, and this one, it looks kind of flat. I'm thinking that one's going to be a lot higher
gonna be
because
higher
the
with more
apples
apples.
are up higher, but we're going to try it anyway. Directions say that you can either eat this warm or cold, and I'm thinking that it would, knowing how we like pie with either whipped cream or ice cream, it would probably be good. I don't want to scratch my plate here. With maybe some pie. I'm thinking being warmed up would probably be really good. But we will actually cut these into little pie wedges. Okay, so we will try a piece and see what it tastes like, okay? And like I said, this is new, so first time I made
We
this.
honestly have not tried this before.
I think it tastes pretty good.
Almost like apple pie. Now, what you need to do, one of the fine Wisconsin traditions, and maybe in some of your families, but I know in ours it always was, my dad always loved sharp cheddar cheese with apple pie. So this is kind of like an apple pie. It's an apple
It
galette.
really is, exactly.
So bring on the sharp cheddar cheese, boys and girls.
And then just another side note, our daughter-in-law's mom made hers. I was just talking to her the other night, and she made the strawberry galette, and she thought it was a little bit too runny because she had used some strawberries from the freezer. So I guess you'd have the same problem if you use frozen apples. So I think
Any frozen.
when making this, if you're using fresh, otherwise you'd want to add maybe some extra cornstarch or something
Right.
to fill in. But
Right.
anyway, I think it's a hit, and I can't wait for
so
the kids
too.
to try this.
Yeah.
So from a slice of heaven, I hope you've enjoyed this episode of this newfound dessert called a galette, and happy cooking.
It's a long story, too.
So here's to your cheese,
Thank you.
and enjoy. It's good.
Nothing better than Wisconsin.
We're done.
No, I don't think we're done yet, because I had to say one more thing to you without food in my mouth.
And that is,
I love you so much.
oh, for Pete's sake. We
Well, I
are
do.
done. That's a wrap. Okay.
That's a wrap. How's my hair? Oh, I said. She probably got that on tape.
Now you need to go wash your hands. Or you.